And we're joined by Suman Bery, who is a senior visiting fellow at Center for Policy Research. Good morning to you, Mr. Bery. First of all, what are your expectations, and given at the limited fiscal headspace for the government, should we expect big bank budget this time?
Well, I caught the tail end. I believe you have Gautam with you, Chikermane, where he was talking about his expectations on the tax front. Look, I'm not sure what you mean by big bang, but what I would say is that the economic survey yesterday set out, I think, with commendable clarity and frankness, that the name of the game is helping economic agents deal with massive uncertainty. Okay? And so what I would hope are various indications that once policies are announced, that they will not be tampered with in a while. I would, though, make the larger point, which is that, assuming that the advance estimates of GDP for 21-22 are approximately right, that we will barely have climbed out of the hole of the pandemic by the end of this fiscal year. So that is 2 important years that have been lost to the pandemic. I think the government's done a pretty good job of handling this. I have admiration for, I don't know whether I want to call it a barbell strategy, but for the common sense that's been used. But let's not lose sight of the fact that 2 important years have been lost on top of a year before that, which was pretty anemic. So that's a huge amount to be made up. And as the economic survey points out, there are the headwinds of oil prices, of the tightening of monetary policy. So really, as an economist, I'm looking for what the signals are that the government is going to give to foreign investors, domestic investors, to say, look, we are determined to make up the lost ground and get back onto the fast growth trajectory that India had enjoyed, recognizing that the global environment is less conducive. So that's the framework within which I'll be listening to what Honorable Finance Minister has to say. I can get into the details, but I think the framing matters, and I think the economic survey did a good job in giving us the tools for the framing. Back to you.
Mr. Bery, this is Gautam Chikermane. I just wanted a clarification. You mentioned that COVID is like sort of a black swan, and therefore India needs to make up. My reading of the global economy, and not only just the pandemic, but other disruptions that are going on in the economy as well, is that black swans are going to be the new normal. And I think governments across the world, including in India, will need to be continuing to remain agile, will continue to have to be ready to change instantly, will continue to have to look at new data, new methods, new ways of dealing with policy that will come, that these black swans will throw at us. For instance, the technological disruption that's going on, even before the COVID struck, and which will continue long after the pandemic is over. I think black swans are here to stay. So I'm not sure how, if we are looking at a normal, we are looking at only a pandemic-free normal, but the risks to the global economy will continue. What do you think?
Well, I would say that we fool ourselves when we say that this period of turbulence is unusual. If you look at the degree of innovation that took place in Victorian England and the fundamental transformation that took place, in technologies, as Robert Gordon has pointed out, which were much more transformational than what we are going through right now. I think that the fact of the matter is that, the world has always been in some kind of ferment. And the question is, do you surf that wave or do you drown under that wave? Okay. Now, what would my barbell be? Let me put it this way. We succeeded in the entire period 91 through, I would say, UPA 1, 2004, to create a sense in the Indian private sector, in the Indian corporate sector, that there was a direction of travel, and that is what that led to the huge boom in private corporate investment. Okay? Now, I think we lost that plot roughly around UPA 1, and to some extent, and that that was then compounded by the global financial crisis. If you are arguing that our government doesn't have the capability of providing guardrails or handrails, or should not provide those guardrails and handrails, that it should, muddle through, I respectfully disagree. I think I worked for Shell in Holland, and I was very struck by, as it were, why the first stock exchange in the world was founded in Amsterdam in the 1600s, because Holland was the Bangladesh of its time, a storm-prone delta region, and basically the Dutch invented financial instruments so they could deal with uncertainty. I mean, in today's world, governments have so many more tools, which they are deploying, by the way, to help people deal with uncertainty, but you can't take your eye off the ball. I disagree.
Bery, one more follow-up question. The 1991 reforms, they only opened up, let us say, the ideological floodgates through which private capital got some sort of a moral strength, so to speak, and then the continuing reforms that happened over the next 3 decades. We have seen them, government after government, come, deliver reforms, sharpen them, go to the last mile, clear it up, etc. All that is happening. But I still see that doing business at a fundamental, at a legal level, at the legislative level, still is a big thing. For instance, there are more than 1,500 laws. 1,500 laws that govern doing business. It's 1,536 laws that govern doing business in India. I think that's a little excessive, including the Factories Act, which the UK itself has repealed so many times and which was taken lock, stock and barrel from the UK, continues to harass Indian businesses. There are 69,233 compliances that businesses need to engage with on an annual basis at an aggregate. Don't get me wrong. Not all businesses have to deliver 69,000 compliances. But these number of compliances are keeping small and medium enterprises small and medium enterprises. They are refusing to go big simply because the day you cross that line of, let us say, 20 employees, the day you cross the line of, let us say, 10 crore investment limit, immediately you are flooded with 500 plus compliances, responsibility, some of which carry jail terms. There are 6,600 filings that businesses need to do at an annual level. So I think the first generation reforms, I see them as the Statement on Industrial Policy 1991 ushered in by P.V. Narasimha Rao. The second generation reforms have happened over a period of 6 to 7 prime ministers that have come from after Narasimha Rao, so from Vajpayee to Modi. But the third generation reforms, I feel, are going to be more administrative and more at the state level than at the union level.
But Gautam, do you have an explanation for why a government which, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm asking the question, what holds this government back. After all, in Bebek Debroy, as the chairman of their Economic Advisory Council, they have, as it were, the most knowledgeable person in the land on economic legislation in this country. Okay, so it is not lack of knowledge. The economic survey has talked about, cleaning up processes. The issue of administrative reform has been on the agenda since UPA 1. I think Dr. Manmohan Singh, as far back as 1994, said that we've more or less cleaned up the incentive framework for the private sector. Now we have to work on the public sector. But, my sense is that somehow our politicians are either unwilling to give up the harassment powers that this legislation represents, or are unwilling to take on their bureaucracy at all levels because there's a food chain associated with it. I don't know, and I don't know if you know. All I'm saying is that 7 years, if you're committed to, as it were, having India become, as it were, the next China or the rival to China, this is not beyond the wit of man. So my question is it can't do, or is it won't do? Accepting your
let me rephrase that your argument. It is not a question of can't do or will do or want to do or wish to do. I think the question here is more constitutional. Several of the laws that I spoke about, let us say the Factories Act, the Minimum Wages Act, or any other law, they are enacted at the union level but enforced at the state level through rules. What I'm trying to argue, or what I'm trying to explore, is the fact that I think as a nation we impart too many expectations and too many responsibilities on the union government, while the constitutional status of the very same laws, rules lies in the states. For instance, land is a state subject, labor is a concurrent subject. So the factories are set up in states. The growth happens in states. The markets are in states. Only the top regulation, like regulatory structure, happens at the union level. Now, the union government has just repealed 1,800 laws 2 years ago, and I think that quest is continuing. But I don't think India, as observers, as analysts, as economists, as simply commentators, I don't think we are ready to accept that growth happens in states. There is an important part of that the states need to play. Agriculture is entirely, for instance, a state subject. They don't tax people because it's a state subject, but you expect subsidies, grants, monies to come from the union side. I think these are the constitutional, let us say, messes that we need to now clear up for the next stage of India's economic reforms.
Okay, but you would agree that what goes by the term cooperative federalism is necessary for that, and it's for each one of us to decide what the degree of commitment to cooperative federalism with opposition states has been on display these many years. But I don't know if Sumit had any other questions. I take your point that that India grows in its states, and the union government, by right, has, and indeed, one could say that the trend towards ever more expansive centrally sponsored schemes that was a feature of the UPA, was an intrusion into the sphere of the states, which, despite many protestations, has not been repealed, and indeed these are used as brand names to glorify the party in power. Other than the points that Gautam has raised, could I return to your fundamental question about my expectations from the budget? I gave you a framing for that, but I do believe that I do believe that trying to think hard about what the trajectory of sustainable growth is going to be in the rest of this decade, and how that's going to be reconciled with our commitments to green growth. These are important issues. I don't expect them in the budget. I would have hoped for slightly more in the economic survey. But for me to, bring back the optimism of the 2000s, that look, India has a manifest destiny for growth, and we will, as we have done with the pandemic, we will successfully negotiate the pitfalls along the way. I think that spirit has to return. Let me also say that there are many positives that the economic survey has revealed. To me, a very important number in the economic survey is that through all of this, admittedly now with the balance tilted towards the public sector, we are maintaining a gross fixed capital formation rate of around 30% of GDP. That's important, and that's huge. And the fact that we are able to do that, I think, gives me optimism for the future.